Every single person in your life seems to be losing their mind right now, talking about beach trips, counting down the days, posting sunset photos, and you are just sitting there watching all of it happen, wondering if something is genuinely broken inside you, because the thought of going outside right now sounds like a punishment you didn't earn. You don't hate fun. You want to be very clear about that. You just hate this particular brand of fun that comes with sweat and UV damage and the social obligation to act thrilled about all of it. And here's the thing people never say out loud. Summer is the only season that comes preloaded with a personality. You don't get handed a checklist in November. Nobody is looking at you sideways in February going, "Why aren't you more into this?" But summer shows up and suddenly there is an unspoken rule that your mood, your wardrobe, and your entire social calendar should realign around the sun, like the sun is your boss now. Congratulations. So what is actually happening in the psychology of someone who recoils from all this? Let's start somewhere a little uncomfortable. There is a decent chunk of the population, and researchers who study sensory processing have been slowly building the case for this, whose nervous systems are wired to pick up more noise, more heat, more stimulation, more everything. Elaine Aron's work on the highly sensitive person describes roughly 20% of the population as having a nervous system that processes environmental input more deeply. And summer is basically a sensory assault that never clocks out. The heat alone, the radiating, relentless, nowhere to hide heat, can push an already stimulated nervous system into a state that feels less like discomfort and more like low-grade dread. You are not being dramatic. Your system is just loudly telling you something that other people's systems are quietly ignoring. And then there is the social pressure, which honestly deserves its own entire video, but we will stay here for a minute. Summer does this thing where everyone's schedule clears at the same time, and suddenly there is this ambient pressure to fill it. The group chats wake up. The "we should all do something" energy arrives. And if you are someone who finds that particular kind of availability quietly exhausting rather than exciting, you know how impossible it is to articulate that without sounding like you are complaining about having friends, which is maybe the most socially unacceptable complaint a person can have. But the tiredness is real, even when the reason sounds ridiculous out loud. And then comes the guilt, which is almost worse than the exhaustion itself because you are not allowed to just be tired. You have to also feel bad about being tired. You catch yourself thinking, "I should want this." And when you don't, that thought curdles into something a little darker, the kind of quiet self-questioning that follows you into August like a second shadow. Can we talk about sleep for a second, because this one genuinely surprises people? The longer days don't just affect your mood in some vague metaphorical way, they mess with melatonin production in a very literal biochemical sense. Light suppresses melatonin. More daylight hours means more melatonin suppression and later sleep onset. And for a lot of people, this leads to chronically worse sleep quality across June, July, and August. Research tracking people across seasons has found that sleep duration in summer is meaningfully shorter compared to winter. We are talking around 16 minutes less per night on average. And while that sounds small, that compounds. Weeks of slightly short sleep is not nothing. And if you are someone who is already sensitive to sleep disruption, who gets irritable or anxious or emotionally dysregulated when they haven't slept properly, then summer isn't just hot and loud. Summer is also making you subtly sleep deprived for 3 consecutive months, and you might have never connected those two things. You thought you were just in a bad mood. You were also exhausted. There is also something worth naming about identity. Summer has a vibe, and if that vibe isn't yours, if you are pale and prefer it, if you hate crowds, if your idea of a good afternoon involves a book and a room with temperature control, then summer is one long season of being slightly out of place in the dominant culture. And humans are social creatures who calibrate a lot of their self-perception against what is around them. Spending 3 months feeling like the only person who didn't get the memo is quietly corrosive to your sense of self in ways you might not even notice until September rolls around, and you feel this wave of relief that is almost embarrassing in how big it is. That relief is data. It is telling you something real about what you actually need to feel okay. And some of it, let's be honest, is memory. Seasons carry emotional residue. Summer might have been the hardest time of year for you at some point. Maybe school was the only structure that made your days feel manageable, and summer obliterated that. Maybe a relationship fell apart in July. Maybe you grew up in a house where the heat made everyone tense and loud. The brain is not great at separating then from now when the environmental cues are identical. The smell of sunscreen, the quality of late afternoon light, the specific sound of a lawnmower. These things are time machines whether you consent to the trip or not. So when summer arrives and you feel this vague, nameless resistance before anything has even happened yet, there is a real possibility that your nervous system is reacting to a previous summer, one that you thought you were over. None of this means you are broken. Actually, and this is something that tends to genuinely surprise people when they hear it, preferring cooler, darker, quieter environments often correlates with higher trait introspection and a richer internal world. Research on thinking introversion, the facet of introversion defined specifically by engagement with one's inner life and imagination, consistently describes it as associated with a cultivated depth of self-awareness that most people spend years trying to build. The people who are most comfortable being inside with their thoughts tend to be people who have put real sustained work into that interior space, consciously or not. That is not a consolation prize. That is a real cognitive and emotional asset. You just happen to have built it partly because the alternative, pretending to love the heat, never worked for you. What is interesting, though, is how rarely people who hate summer are actually allowed to just hate summer without a caveat, without the, "oh, but you should really try to enjoy it" response, without someone suggesting a different sunscreen or a better hat as if the problem was ever hat-related. The season has enough cultural capital that disliking it reads as a personality defect to some people. And so a lot of summer haters have learned to perform a mild tolerance they don't actually feel, which is its own kind of exhaustion layered on top of everything else. You've been managing other people's feelings about your feelings about weather for years, and you've been doing it politely. Here is something I want you to sit with before September rescues you again. The way you move through summer, the retreating, the carefully rationed social energy, the genuine relief you feel when clouds roll in, that is not failure. That is self-knowledge. Knowing what costs you and choosing to protect yourself from it is something that a large portion of the population is actively working toward in therapy and still hasn't figured out. You already know. You've always known. You just thought knowing something about yourself that diverged from the majority meant something was wrong with you. It doesn't. It means you've been paying attention. And if you've made it this far, if you watched this and felt recognized by any piece of it, I'd genuinely love to know in the comments what summer actually feels like for you. Because for all the beach content and golden hour posts, there are a lot of people scrolling in a slightly air-conditioned room hoping someone would just say it. So, there it is. One last thing. A lot of people watching are quietly dealing with the exact stuff this video orbits. A brain that won't stop, a sleep schedule that's been off for longer than you'd like to admit, and a focus that seems to have packed up and left at some point without telling you. There's a link in the description and pinned comment to a bundle that was built around exactly that. 7-day guides and daily planners covering clearing the mental backlog, rebalancing your dopamine so your brain stops craving constant noise, actually fixing your sleep rather than just thinking about fixing it, and rebuilding your focus one day at a time. Each one gives you a specific daily action. It's in the pinned comment too. So I hope you check it out. If this exploration of the hidden side of summer changed the way you look at your own seasonal struggles, please subscribe and like the channel. We are uncovering the psychological truths and internal histories that society often tries to ignore. Let's cultivate a future built on self-understanding. The next chapter of our journey will be opening soon.